That's better. Hello. Thank you for all coming. Poppy was going to be here today talking to you about some stuff. She's, as you know, one of the co-founders of all this. Unfortunately, she can't be here, so you're stuck with me. But one thing I'd like to do, I know she's going to listen to this, can we just all have a big hello to Pops, give her a big shout and scream? She's going to be listening and watching. Yes. Yeah, I know she'll like that. So, whilst everyone's been celebrating the removal of the coronavirus provisions and the acts, the government's performing a classic bait and switch, and they're looking to bring in legislation that not only strengthens their ability to impose on all of us our day-to-day lives, but also looks to clamp down hard on any dissent. Right now they're running two of the most important consultations of our time. Two pieces of legislation are being proposed. There's a new UK Bill of Rights and there's a new online safety bill. Now the online safety bill is, amongst other things, provisions to criminalise disinformation or anything that anyone finds distressing online. And the scope of this is so broad. Effectively, any of us here sharing any thoughts that may be contrary to the narrative, it could be criminalised if someone decides to report you for sharing it, and the threshold for offence is forever being lowered. Whilst the online safety bill is a concern, you're right there, a far greater worry should be the new proposal to remove the Human Rights Act and replace it with this UK Bill of Rights. This bill has been described by a human rights lawyer as dictatorship legislation. Now what many don't realise is this bill is a fundamental rewriting of the relationship between the government and all of us. Let's get one thing clear. Any human rights granted to you are a subjugation of you regardless. Your human rights aren't granted by anybody. What the government seeks to do is to make your human rights subservient to the benefit of the common good. And they want to prioritise the state over the individual. Now the common good, as many of you know, has always been the mantra of pretty much every dictatorship when oppressing the individual through time. And they get to define what the common good is. They're also looking to make your human rights conditional on your behaviour, including the stuff you've done in the past, according to the rules they decide to set. If you're not a valuable member of society, they can treat you differently, and we've all seen where that goes in the past. Couple this with the digital ID and the central bank digital currencies we know they want to put in place. They are in effect moving to the social credit ideology of the Chinese Communist state. Under this bill, courts will no longer be allowed to amend Acts of Parliament, where it conflicts with the new Human Rights Bill, as the will of Parliament will now be deemed supreme. Our legal system is based on over 900 years of case law and precedents. If a law is unjust, the courts can and have changed it through time. This has always been a fundamental check and balance on the power in our democracy. This Act seeks to remove that check. Until the 8th of March, they're asking for our opinions, and you can go to consult.justice.gov.uk. I implore all of you to do so. You can also visit saveourrights.uk, where there's a template you can use to respond to the consultation. It takes less than 5 minutes. 5 minutes for what might affect you for the rest of your lives. We're going to put this and a lot more detailed information up on Truth Talk after this, across this weekend, with a lot more information on the legislation, so you can go and see for yourselves. But the Human Rights Act isn't perfect. Yet these proposals are the biggest threats to our human rights yet, and they must be opposed by anyone who values freedom and liberty for the individual. All of you must join this fight. So, thank you for that. Now, we have got a lot of different groups here. Obviously, I represent Truth Talk. We've got a lot of people from Ireland Friends, Delaney and a few others are starting up. We are here, Isle of Wight, and there's a lot happening. We've got a hell of a lot of info over there. You can donate as well. All this stuff that we do does cost money, and while we're not poor, it all helps make signs, get the message out, get stuff printed out that we can all give to all of you. So what I'd say to all of you today is get involved. Come and sign up, take some bits out, give them to other people, spread the message a little bit. I'd expected that to take a little bit longer, but there's a man over here I'm sure you'll want to hear from a little bit more. So without further ado, David Icke.
Thanks, mate. Oh, there you go. Oh, we've got a bit more room this time. They say every cloud has a silver lining, and it does really. No matter how bad it is, there's always a shining light somewhere. And what's happened in this period of the COVID hoax is that so many people around the world have awakened to the fact that the world is not like they thought it was. And, you know, I wonder if so many people would be here today if COVID hadn't happened. Probably not. But it's triggered an understanding in more and more people that those that are running this world are not the ones that appear to be. And the question then is, I asked this 32 years ago, who the hell are they and to what end? And when I started investigating this over these decades, it became clear that we are facing an agenda for the human race that is beyond sci-fi. It's beyond almost dystopia, and it's been worked towards step by step, not only over decades but over hundreds of years and more. And you can see, and they want you to, you can see events and happenings in and of themselves, and they look a certain way. Like the COVID hoax would look a certain way. The dismantling of the Human Rights Act for this Bill of Rights would look a certain way in and of themselves. But I have a phrase, know the outcome and you'll see the journey. And to understand how all this fits together, we need to know the outcome, and then the journey becomes self-evident, in which all these apparent individual dots become a very clear pattern, a very clear picture. So, what is the outcome that we're being moved towards? An outcome that, because we're getting closer and closer to it, is now going on public display. You know, you can manipulate under the radar for a long time and move the pieces on the chessboard into place. But there comes a time when what you are manipulating in terms of a transformation of human society has to be put on public display. It has to break the surface, because if it doesn't, you're not going to change human society. And so what you do then is you move to a point where you start to sell it. You start to sales pitch it as a good idea, and those that won't accept it as a good idea, you then start getting seriously aggressive with, as we've seen in Canada. So this goal is for a global dictatorship based on a world government, a world army imposing the will of the world government, a single world digital currency, and the end of cash. I first said that was the plan in 1993 in a book, and cash is flying out of circulation now for that reason. And like I say, beyond sci-fi, where even the human mind is taken over by artificial intelligence. And that's not some conspiracy theory pulled out of the ether. That's what they're telling us. Except that they're saying, because it's sales pitch time, that it's going to make us gods. It's going to make us superhuman. The idea, of course, because everything this crowd say is an inversion, that's why they lie all the time, an inversion of the truth. It's not making us superhuman, it's making us post-human, where even the human mind as we know it is replaced by AI. And look at the quotes from a guy called Ray Kurzweil, a so-called futurist at Google, and you'll see him saying exactly that a long time ago now, and giving a target year of 2030. Now, for that to happen, all opposition to it, which that would be enormous if people only realized and lifted their eyes from the BBC and CNN and all that nonsense. So you do two things. First of all, you censor those increasingly vehemently that you know are warning people, making people aware that that is where we're going. And then, in league with that, you take away step by step by step the basic human rights, the basic rights to freedom of speech and freedom of expression. Because what you're doing all the time, step by step, you are denying the right of any information that exposes your agenda from being circulated among your target population. I wrote in a book a long, long time ago, decades ago, that the plan was that eventually no one would ever see or hear anything that wasn't sanctioned by the government, sanctioned by authority, ultimately sanctioned by this world government. And that's what we've been seeing stage by stage by stage. I've lived through it. You know, they started the internet to become the central pillar of human society, where everything, all information went through. And they wanted to create a situation whereby algorithms, AI, could not only take down information the authorities don't want you to see, it could actually stop it being posted. That technology is now with us. And so this has gone on. It started when YouTube and such like were demonetizing anyone putting information on those platforms that was exposing the truth. And then they started, step by step, more and more things were disinformation, more and more things were not allowed. And this has gone on and on and on. And it's not going to stop, because it's not meant to stop. It's meant to reach the point where no one sees or hears anything that isn't sanctioned by authority. So people have said, well, if you don't like the censorship by these companies like Facebook and Google and YouTube and Twitter, start your own then. And so people did. Necessity is the mother of invention. Some fantastic things have happened. Social media platforms that don't censor have emerged. Video platforms that don't censor have emerged. So, know the outcome and you'll see the journey. No one sees anything or hears anything that authority doesn't sanction, which means those platforms have to go. Otherwise, they can't achieve that end. And this is what the online safety bill in this country, and they have their like around the world, the Department of Homeland Security in America is dubbing those that produce their version of disinformation, they're calling them terrorists. What did the fascist Trudeau call the truckers? Terrorists. And it's all to do with justifying their censorship. But this bill in Britain is a real humdinger. The online safety bill. It's going through Parliament now. And what it does is give power to a truly fascist organization, so fascist it was created by Tony Blair in 2001, called Ofcom, the Office of Communications. Ofcom put out a diktat to the entire broadcast media in April 2020, saying what they could and could not broadcast, which effectively and was designed to ensure that I could not appear in the broadcast mainstream media, and I never have since. So this is the organization we are dealing with. And what this bill does, staggeringly but predictably, is give power to Ofcom to decide if anything posted is, in their opinion, harmful. It can be perfectly legal, it can be perfectly lawful, you can say things freely in the street that they call harmful, and they can't be posted or they have to be taken down. And if the people don't take them down, then this bill allows for business destroying, people destroying levels of fines and even jail if they don't do so. And what they're doing, these criminals, is trying to sell this bill on the basis of it's to stop child pornography, child abuse material, terrorist material, misinformation. That's code for the truth, of course. But that's not what it's about. You see this lady Doris, or this culture secretary, who is talking about, this bill, what it could do. We could put Zuckerberg in jail if he doesn't do what we say. Well, Zuckerberg wants to do what you say. You're just giving him the excuse to further censor what he's already censoring. And of course, it's all a diversion, it's all a smokescreen. The online safety bill is nothing whatsoever to do with targeting the mainstream internet. It's destroying what's left of the alternative media. That's what it's for. And the common denominator, wherever you look, because of where this agenda is designed to go, is to remove your ability to communicate information that exposes the truth of what's going on. And then as we come to the Bill of Rights, Bill of Wrongs, that is designed to be the replacement of the Human Rights Act, it's to take away your ability to defend yourself against government diktat. And I hear what it says about taking away the ability of the courts to hold government to account, and that's absolutely right and needs to be addressed. But much of the court system is already, most of it, if not almost all of it, is already completely stitched up. I'm not saying every judge is corrupt, but a lot of them are. And what they do is when they have a piece of legislation or they have a court case where they have to win it, it has to go their way, all they do is put a safe judge in there, and they know they're going to get the decision they want. So the courts, to a large extent, are already stitched up. Crucial for me in this Bill of Rights tyranny is changing the relationship between the individual and the collective, the group. This is another constant common theme if you look around. What is the censorship about? It is about deleting individual opinion if it does not correspond with the group. Everything is about the group must prevail. And so here we have a situation in this proposed Bill of Rights where the greater good, the good of the cult, supersedes individual rights. Now, if that was in place in the last 2 years, think of the implications for mandatory fake vaccines for everybody. And this is where the whole thing is going, towards the group trumps the individual. Because the sovereignty, the true sovereignty, is within the individual. That's where freedom lies. The freedom of an individual to make choices that they choose. What this control system is about is usurping that by saying what matters to the group, what's best for the group, is what actually must prevail. And what's best for the group will be decided by this cabal. So what we've been given in the last 2 weeks is a preview of what I'm talking about in Canada. All around the world, laws have been put into place, not talked about, kept from the public arena, to be played out when the time comes. And you saw in Canada that when they wanted to destroy the freedom of the truckers and their supporters to peacefully protest, you had this law, this Emergencies Act, brought out specifically to deal with that, which involved the destruction of the most basic freedoms, including the right to have a bank account with your money in it. Now these laws, these emergency laws, are in every country, including this one, to be played out when they consider the time is right. And we saw in Canada how fast that can happen. And what we're seeing with this Human Rights Act demolition is another massive step towards the point where you have no rights. Tell the truckers in Canada they have rights after what they've experienced. And you know, what happened pretty soon is that Justin Trudeau, who is a graduate of a leaders' school run by a guy called Klaus Schwab at the World Economic Forum, that's part of this cult that's orchestrating all this, and his deputy prime minister, a lady called Freeland, the irony is not lost, who is not only another graduate of the Schwab School, but is on the board of trustees of the World Economic Forum. And Schwab, in an interview, bragged that half the cabinet in Canada were graduates of his school. So Schwab is running Canada. But what they did pretty soon, after the furore and the reaction to what they did with the bank accounts and everything, is they said, oh, no, we're going to drop it now. And the reason they did that, with orders, very loudly in their ear, is they alerted people to what's going on behind the scenes and what's waiting behind the scenes too early. Yeah. In every country, that is sitting and waiting. And you know, as we move through these years, as this tyranny puts itself on public display, I think it really is time that we all reevaluate our lives and reevaluate what we're doing here. Because who wants to face what's going on? Nobody does. They don't want to know about this. They want to do their job and earn money for their family and feed their family and go on holiday and have a laugh. All those things. But that time when that is the priority in terms of getting on with what you call a normal life, well, those times are over if we want to do something about this. Because every day this is moving closer and closer to that goal of global tyranny. And what is happening in Ukraine all connects into this. I said in a book, a few books actually, a long time ago, that the plan eventually was to pitch the West against an alliance of Russia and China, with Iran thrown in, as part of a Third World War that would completely transform human society, as wars always do. We had a totally different world after World War I, provable fact, manipulated by this cult. We had a totally different world again after World War II, same, and there was always planned to be 3 world wars. And what this situation we're now looking at is doing, exactly as planned, is pushing Russia and China closer and closer together. And to understand the nature of everything that's going on is not to look at Johnson and Trudeau and Biden and Morrison and Ardern, not to look at them and Macron. Oh yeah, they're relevant, but to see where it's really being orchestrated from. And we're in a process now where the key word to understand events is China. Because the Chinese system of control is being played out across the world. It's been incubated there for decade after decade after decade following the Mao Revolution. And these situations we're talking about here, the online safety bill and the Bill of Rights, are part of that process of making the West like China. And if you look at what's happened over the last many, many decades, and you'd think that, and people do ask this who don't know the game, what has America been doing and Europe been doing, moving all its bloody production to China, which then controls the supply chain, which then controls the production and availability of basic goods. Almost the entirety of America's antibiotics start out life in China. Anybody think the antibiotics might just stop arriving if there was a conflict? Yes. And so what you do to understand this is you look at Russia, headed by Vladimir Putin, Schwab School Leaders Graduate. You look at Trudeau, Schwab School Leaders Graduate. You look at the Lady Ardern in New Zealand, who's turned New Zealand fascist, Schwab School Leaders Graduate. And so it goes on. Tony Blair, of course, you would expect that. Chancellor Merkel, on and on and on it goes. So the answer to why America has made decision after decision to the benefit of China is China is the cult blueprint, and the cult owns the Biden administration, indeed whatever party's in power. It owns the British government. It owns the British excuse for opposition party. It owns Trudeau, it owns Macron, it owns Ardern, it owns Morrison in Australia. This is what is happening. So all these things have to be seen in this context. that nothing that affects the world in any way seriously is random. But it comes down to this in the end. You can add up all these people. You can add to them all the gophers and the uniforms in the police and the military. Add them bloody all up. And then take them away from the global population of getting on for 8 billion people. They don't register in terms of numbers. And we have got to start as a human race dropping the fear of authority, dropping the fear of standing up to authority, not conforming to authority, because two types of people allow tyranny to reign, and they've allowed tyranny to reign in the COVID era. One, people who do not think for themselves, have no capacity for free thought, and are, as I call them, software people. Authority presses enter, then the program runs. Oh yeah, I need my jab, I need a booster. So then, those people, well, that's a struggle. But then you've got the next group that has been responsible for every tyranny in history. And that's the group that doesn't want to do it, that can see they're being lied to, but does it anyway because they fear not doing it. And then there's the third group, which has ended every tyranny in history. And that's the group that can see it, doesn't want it, and therefore will not cooperate with it. And what we need is for that group to get bigger and bigger, and more of that second group to move over. Because, like I say, this is not pussyfooting around now. It never was. But people more and more can see it's not. This is not an add-on to our lives. This is about the very nature of life and our children's lives and our grandchildren's lives from here on in. That's what it's about. And the reason that it's becoming more and more obvious to anyone with a brain cell on active duty is because they're getting closer and closer to that goal, and therefore they can't hide it anymore. So this is a time for people to summon the courage and make standing up to this the priority, because everything comes from this. And if we don't, then we will regret for the rest of our lives not doing so, and our children and grandkids will regret it for even longer. Thank you very much.